If it weren't for the apocalypse, I wouldn't have known I had such a saintly and selfless brother. When everyone was struggling just to find food, he insisted that I distribute the supplies I had hoarded before the disaster to all our neighbors. When I refused, my parents joined him in accusing me of being cruel and heartless. I scoffed internally, keeping my expression blank as I said, "Heartless, am I? Fine. I'll leave everything to you and walk out with nothing from now on. You needn't worry about whether I live or die." After saying that, I slammed the door and stormed off, but after closing the door, I didn't actually leave. I just stood there outside. After waiting a minute and realizing that no one came out to persuade me to come back, my heart truly sank. I should have known better. My parents, who always favored my brother over me, never really cared about me as a child. They left me to grow up at my grandmother's house in the countryside, rarely even visiting me during the holidays, even though they had already bought a car and a house in the city. It was always just the three of them. It was only when I graduated high school and got into a prestigious university that they brought me home to celebrate, only to send me back to my grandmother's after collecting the congratulatory money. I begged them desperately, and only then did they agree to let me live with them, in a house without a room for me, sleeping in the living room. They didn't provide a wardrobe for me either. I had to store my clothes under the bed, season by season. When it was time to pay for my university tuition, they refused because their precious son needed the money for a mediocre college abroad, a college he didn't even graduate from. My so-called kind-hearted brother, who showed compassion to every beggar, never once stood up for me. Instead, he advised me, "Having a bed in the living room ruins the aesthetics," and yet, our parents agreed to it. You should be grateful to them. A girl who had a crush on him, mistaking me for his girlfriend, pushed me down the stairs at our doorstep. I lay there, face bloodied and bruised, yet he apologized to her on my behalf, claiming it was my fault for the misunderstanding. He forgave her for me, without my consent. He was tolerant towards strangers, forgiving towards himself, but never towards me. I headed straight to apartment 101 on the first floor, took out my keys, and quickly locked myself in, securing the door with a deadbolt and the already installed reinforced and electrified gates. The room, fitted with steel bars and electrified mesh on the windows, was a perfect sanctuary, and the people in apartment 401 didn't even know that I had my own place, right in the same building as them. Lying on the bed, I scrolled through social media on my phone. I saw in the community group chat that my brother Colby was inviting everyone to take food from his place, offering 1 pack of instant noodles per family. Those were the supplies I had stored up before the apocalypse, not imagining they would last into this harsh, post-apocalyptic winter. The apocalypse was triggered by zombies, and the global cooling had frozen them solid, rendering them immobile. The government had already dealt with them comprehensively, but now, the challenge was the food shortage and the inability to farm in the cold weather. Greenhouses were insufficient to meet the staple food needs of the population. Even with a decrease in population due to the zombies, the crops grown were nowhere near enough to feed everyone, especially those in the city, where accessing fresh fruits and vegetables became even harder. With most people relying on long-stored foods, having anything to eat at all was a luxury. Many in the community group were running out of food supplies, and they were all tearfully grateful for Colby's generosity, expressing their thanks with crying emojis. I had given the food away, and I was indifferent about it, but I had initially refused to share because, and I did it considering their family of 3, after all, there were only a few boxes of instant noodles left. If they continued to consume 2 or 3 packets per person daily, as they used to, the stock would be depleted within the month. What would they do then? But now that I have left, there's no need for me to worry about them anymore. Providing them with food was the extent of my moral duty. My ties with my parents and siblings in this life have come to an end. Giving them that food was my way of thanking them. Thank them for not raising me themselves, but for letting me grow up beside my grandmother. However, there are good and bad aspects to repaying kindness. Knowing Colby, a foolish and hypocritical man, leaving those boxes of instant noodles for him was undoubtedly the right decision in these apocalyptic times. Such qualities are precious. Not indulging his saintly facade would be embarrassing. Lying in bed and setting my phone aside, I felt increasingly weary as I recalled past events. 3. Before university, my tuition and living expenses were provided by my grandmother. I stubbornly stayed at my parents' house, hoping to ease her burden. Little did I know that my so-called parents had no plans to support me, not even offering a dime for my college celebration banquet. My tuition and living expenses were secretly covered by my aunt without my parents' knowledge. She told me I didn't need to repay her, but I still worked hard to pay her back, fearing that my grandmother would worry. I never told her about my job. Once during winter break, my grandmother came to the countryside to surprise me, but I wasn't home. She sat on the sofa and asked my father, who was playing cards, "Where did Wendy go?" My father replied impatiently, "She's out working." My grandmother couldn't understand why I needed to work. Concerned for me, she asked my father to call me home, but he retorted, "Why call her back? She's earning her own tuition. If she doesn't earn it, I won't give it to her." My grandmother was unaware of the life I endured at home, because I always chose to share only the good news with her. Angry and trembling, she took her cane, intending to go out and bring me home herself. But shortly after she stepped outside, she collapsed in the snowy, icy conditions. Meanwhile, my father continued playing his card game upstairs. By the time someone found her, she had already stopped breathing, and I didn't even get to see her one last time, as my parents rushed her directly to the crematorium. During that time, my brother Colby publicly blamed me. "Grandma had an accident, and you show up now. All you care about is working, as if you're obsessed with money." With tears in my eyes, I confronted him. "You and Mom only told me about Grandma's death 20 minutes ago. I came as fast as I could without any delay. Why didn't you tell me when she was taken to the hospital, or when she was taken to the funeral home, only informing me after she was already cremated?" My brother was left speechless. For, when I returned to my hometown to sort through my grandmother's belongings, my aunt secretly handed me something. It was a property deed, and to my surprise, it was registered in my name. This was the apartment my grandmother had bought, located in the same building as ours, Unit 101. She had hoped that after my graduation, I could live there and keep her company as before. My aunt, also my grandmother's biological daughter, had watched me grow up. She was well aware of my parents' true nature, so she didn't mind that my grandmother sold her old house to buy this apartment for me. Moreover, my aunt and her husband had made a good sum of money in their business years earlier and even contributed extra to furnish the new apartment, hoping to make it comfortable for me and my grandmother. This was the surprise my grandmother had prepared for me. Unfortunately, her dream would never be realized. 5. Thinking of these events inevitably brings sadness, and with sadness comes a craving for food. Patting my empty stomach, I pushed open the nightstand and lifted the tile beneath it, revealing a hollow entrance. This was the cellar I had started building before the apocalypse was believed to be just a rumor. I seriously prepared for it as if it were the truth. Primarily, I thought that even if it wasn't for an apocalypse, it was good to be prepared for emergencies, unexpectedly. It really came in handy. The emergency food I stored in the cellar is more than 10 times what room 401 has, including essentials like rice, compressed biscuits, oils, salts, and even hot pot ingredients, and lots of bottled water. There are also many snacks. Although some might be past their expiration date, I would still eat them if they haven't gone bad during these extraordinary times. Picking up a self-heating hot pot, I went back up from the cellar, added water, and heated it. Noticing the water flow from the tap wasn't as strong as before, I realized that tap water would soon become a scarce resource. While waiting for the hot pot to cook, I started collecting tap water in 2 large barrels in a storage bin at home. Unexpectedly, I managed to fill the barrels, but the storage bin was only half full. I don't know if there will be water tomorrow. I just hope this stop isn't permanent. Eating the hot pot. Watching the hot oil bubble around slices of potato and glass noodles, the spicy aroma filling the room, it was sheer bliss. Back in room 401 with Colby and my parents, I never mentioned that I had more resources. At the start of the apocalypse, they were reluctant to go out and hoard food, believing the disaster would pass quickly and that there was no need to worry. It was me who went out to buy lots of rice and instant noodles, using my own saved money since they wouldn't give me any. I was already being generous by sharing those supplies with them, and to think they even planned on giving some away. Let them be. I wonder what they'll do once they've eaten all their food. Anyway, I'm done looking after them. While eating and browsing my phone, a chat notification popped up on Instagram. I opened it and saw it was from Colbert, a senior from my university days. He was also someone who chose to stock up before the apocalypse, and we had exchanged a lot of information about our supplies. However, after the apocalypse started, I had contacted him, but it took a long time for him to reply, merely saying nothing was wrong, and I didn't pry further. I didn't know why he was contacting me now. "Colbert, what's Colby doing in the community group? He's giving away your food. How long can you last? If you run out of food, come find me." I was stunned for a moment, and hurriedly declined when he sent a video call request. After I declined, there was a long silence from Colbert. As I was still deliberating what to reply, almost falling asleep, he finally sent another message. "Wendy, if you need me, I can come to you anytime." I pondered for a long time before replying. "I've left them. I'm doing well now. Thanks." Colbert responded instantly with, "Good." Seeing his reply, I was lost in thought for a long time. The apocalypse was supposed to be every man for himself. Everyone was afraid to underestimate human nature. Everyone reminded themselves to be cold-hearted, not to be kind or forgiving, and so, my heart turned cold. Thus, I never thought anyone would come to help me. I only thought about standing alone, but in times when everyone was struggling, he easily made a promise, anytime. These words, although simple, I knew Colbert would really do it. After a fulfilling meal, I took a nap. In the evening, when I woke up, I heard many hurried footsteps and voices outside my door, creeping to the door to listen. I heard someone angrily say, "Damn it, it was a wasted trip, the instant noodles are all gone." They said 1 pack per household, but when we got there, they only brought out 5 packs. Here's what was said: "Now you guys can split it. No need to be polite." Polite my foot. Hardly anyone went, and that family already said they ran out. Clearly, they just didn't want to give any more. A few people cursed as they walked out of the building entrance, hearing their complaints. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. I knew it. Colby was never really generous enough to give away all his instant noodles. Trying to be a good Samaritan in chaotic times without wanting to part with his stuff, he was bound to face his comeuppance sooner or later. The next day, I woke up freezing, touching the floor. It felt icy cold. The underfloor heating had stopped. I struggled to get out of bed, but my willpower was worthless against the warmth of my blankets. Just as I was about to lie back down, I suddenly remembered the heating was off, which probably meant no electricity either. Sure enough, the lights wouldn't turn on, and when I tried the faucet, there was indeed no water. Even though I had anticipated this and prepared coal, charcoal, and candles, the sudden lack of electricity was still hard to get used to. Eventually, my phone would just become a useless brick. I was just about to check my phone for any new messages when I saw that Colby had sent me a text. "Wendy, where have you gone? Did you know Dad is sick? Come back and look after Dad, and bring some medicine and water if you can. Food would be great too." Excuse me, did he think I went out hunting or something? Bringing stuff back too? I've said I left with nothing. Does he really not understand human speech? Or did he just never take my words seriously from the start, narrowing my eyes? I sarcastically replied, "Oh, is that the lazy big brother who loves to preach, but hates to work?" Without waiting for his reply, I blocked him on Instagram. Spare me the hassle. Just as I put down my phone, it vibrated with another message, but before I could check it, I heard loud banging at the door. Approaching the door, I heard several men's voices. "Hey, we can't get this door open. Didn't we bring tools? If the lock won't open, just pry it." Hearing this, my heart skipped a beat, thinking I might be facing robbers. Hard times can push people to desperate measures, and given their likely hunger and irritation, I couldn't predict what they might do. The electric fence I had prepared was meant to deter such people, but now with the power out, I felt apprehensive, knowing if they got in, I could lose all my supplies, maybe even my whole home. Should I offer them some stuff to make them leave? I dismissed the thought as soon as it came. No joke, I'm not a fool like Colby. Giving these people a bit of advantage would only make them greedier and more reckless. Just as I picked up a kitchen knife for self-defense, preparing to confront them if they entered, someone suddenly said, "I used to live in this building. This place has been empty for a long time. Dust all over the door. Even if we get it open, there's probably nothing inside. Better check out apartment 401 where they distributed food yesterday. They definitely have some stock." The prying stopped, and footsteps gradually moved upstairs. Only then did I dare to relax my grip on the knife, a wave of sadness washing over me. Such incidents wouldn't just happen today. One day, they might actually break in, and me, all alone, ultimately couldn't fend them off. I don't know how much time passed before I heard knocking on the door again. I startled, thinking those people had returned, but listening carefully, the knocking had a rhythmic pattern. 3 knocks, 2 knocks, 1 knock. This is a personal habit of mine that hardly anyone notices. Incredulously, I walked to the door, peered through the peephole, and then cautiously and shakily unlocked all the locks. The person standing outside then entered the room. In the dimly lit room, the fruit knife I was holding fell to the floor. I suddenly threw myself into the arms of the young man who was opening his arms wide, suppressing my voice while crying and laughing. "Colbert, are you silly?" 9. I had rejected Colbert, but he was worried about me and came to see me anyway. I showed him around my house. Interestingly, many of the designs of the doors, windows, and the categorization of supplies were done by Colbert. We had agreed that if the apocalypse really came, we could live here together. Back then, our feelings for each other were veiled, neither of us willing to break that delicate barrier, especially since the apocalypse was looming and no one was in the mood for love. But then, just as the apocalypse began, Colbert suddenly disappeared. During the peak of the zombie waves, I often wondered if he had died. Later, I learned that he had been abandoned by his biological parents and raised by a foster father. When the apocalypse erupted and his foster father was still away on a business trip, Colbert, worried, went to search for him alone, only to find that his foster father had died in a foreign land. The debt of raising him was greater than heaven, so in the midst of chaos, he traveled miles to retrieve his foster father's body, wishing his soul to return to his homeland. Life is full of helplessness, and misfortune always abounds in desperate times. No one can change this, we can only accept it. We looked at each other in silence for a long time, finally both smiling. We were both still alive, and that was the luckiest thing of all. 10. This time Colbert came only with a suitcase and a backpack. In front of me, he opened it to reveal a bunch of metal parts and the like. I've modified a combined power and solar generator. Bringing the whole thing would have been too conspicuous, so I disassembled it and packed it into the suitcase for reassembly. It fits perfectly, Colbert said, then began to sit on the floor and tinker with the assembly. I couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Good thing we have you. Does this mean we can use the little sun tonight? Colbert shook his head with resignation. Not for high power. It can probably only maintain basic charging and lighting, and at most boil water or cook some food. That was practical enough, I thought with satisfaction. With Colbert here, I felt much more at ease. I sat next to him and heated 2 bags of lotus root powder with a self-heating pack. Considering it our breakfast for 2, remembering that I hadn't closed the fence at the entrance, I went to shut it and heard the group that had gone upstairs earlier seem to be coming down again, followed by a flurry of frantic footsteps. As they passed the door, I heard one of them say, "Room 401 really had a stash." Grabbed all their instant noodles. "We're going to have a feast today." Colbert and I silently exchanged glances, both seeing a hint of schadenfreude in each other's eyes. Colby showing kindness now was like flaunting wealth, and it was no surprise to be robbed. Anyone with a bit of sense would have foreseen this. He might have thought that after the zombies were completely cleared, it would be time for reconstruction and development after the apocalypse, so he started being overly generous. But what Colby didn't anticipate was that post-apocalypse was still an apocalypse, followed by a long, harsh winter. This winter wasn't temporary. The countless springs, summers, and autumns to come would also be filled with snowflakes. 11. I had been getting notifications on my phone earlier, but hadn't looked until I finally had a moment to check. It was from my aunt. She asked how I was doing lately, just as she used to. I replied, "Auntie, I'm doing well. Don't worry. If you ever need help, just let me know." My aunt sent a smiling emoji, then added, "Your aunt is fine here too, Wendy. Don't worry about me. Your brother told me you left home. And I knew then that you've moved out to live on your own, away from your parents. Actually, leaving them might be good for you." Colby, that tattletale. I rolled my eyes and was about to send a cute sticker in reply. Just then, another message from my aunt came through. "I believe in you. You can manage well on your own. Even if one day I'm no longer around, I can rest easy knowing this." Reading this, my right eyelid twitched twice, sensing something off about my aunt. I tried calling her to talk, but her phone was unreachable, and so was her Instagram call. It seemed she was determined not to answer. My heart slowly cooled, and all I could do was pray that nothing was wrong with her. At lunch, Colbert and I had some compressed biscuits and drank from a barrel of water I had brought up from the cellar. The tap water we collected yesterday was used for washing and flushing the toilet. Colbert was quick to set up the generator. There was still some power left in the battery. He plugged my charger into the generator, connected it to his phone, and sure enough, it started charging. Although we both knew that smartphones don't last forever, it's still an essential tool for communicating with the outside world, especially under these circumstances when no one wants to be cut off. Someone in the community group was speaking up, tagging Colby to ask him to get some more food for everyone. Colby replied with obvious resentment, "You've already taken all the food from my house, and now you want me to find more. How greedy can you be?" Colbert saw his reply and chuckled helplessly. "He has the nerve to call others greedy when he's been using your stuff to curry favor himself." I shrugged. Some people are just like crows on a coal pile, quick to see the dirt on others, but blind to their own. 12. At bedtime, Colbert tossed me a fluffy pink coral fleece pajama set. It looked very warm. I looked at him in surprise, and he pulled out a blue set from his bag, clearly a matching set for couples. Then, he coughed lightly into his fist, his clean, angular face blushing slightly under the dim light. "I bought these before, and they're just perfect for this weather." I had wondered why his bag was so bulky and why he wouldn't let me see inside. It turned out he had brought these. I let out a long "oh," my lips curving into an uncontrollable smile. Before the apocalypse, our feelings for each other were unspoken. After reuniting in this post-apocalyptic world, we naturally came to regard each other as an important part of our lives. Everything felt so natural, as if it was always meant to be this way. 101 has 2 bedrooms, each with a bed, so we each took one. Woken up by the cold in the middle of the night, I thought about how chilly it was and decided to fetch all the quilts from the house to stay warm. I even considered installing a stove in the room, as I had some coal prepared. However, burning it in an enclosed space could lead to carbon monoxide poisoning, so I decided against taking that risk. Getting up to grab 2 sets of cotton quilts, I bumped into Colbert, who was also up, just in time. "Take these quilts back to your room," I said. He walked towards me in the dark, sleepy and disoriented, touched my face, and exclaimed, "You're so cold." Without further ado, he picked me up along with the quilts and carried me to his room. He covered me with the 2 quilts I was holding and then crawled into his own bed, wrapping an arm around me through the quilts, softly saying, "Sleep now." I found it hard to fall asleep last night. Lying awake in the darkness, listening to his steady breathing somehow brought a sense of peace to my heart. To find such tranquility in the apocalypse was my heart's desire, and now that the dream has come true, I relish it. 13. When I woke up this morning, it was still dark, and Colbert hadn't woken up yet. Instead of getting up right away, I naturally reached for my phone to check for any updates, just like before the apocalypse. But as soon as I unlocked the screen, a message popped up that made my heart leap to my throat. My phone was on silent while I slept, and during that time, my aunt had sent me a message, actually several messages. "Wendy, my dad kicked me and my mom out. Everything we own is with him and his mistress. We are now utterly helpless, and mom doesn't even want to live anymore. She keeps talking about suicide. She didn't want me to tell you, but I don't know what else to do. Wendy, can you help us?" From the way she addressed me and her tone, I could tell that it was my cousin Wallace using my aunt's phone. Because I was asleep and didn't check my phone, she must have been waiting for a response for a long time, and finally, as if making up her mind, she sent another message. "Wendy, I'm really sorry. I know I shouldn't have come to you on my own, but I really don't want my mom to die. Please help me take care of her for a while. I'll make sure she can manage on her own afterward." Reading this, my heart ached. After what my aunt said yesterday, I had a bad feeling, and now it had come true. I had always called to ask if they needed any help, and my aunt would always bluntly say, "Everything's fine here, I'm okay." I went to college with my aunt's financial support, and I haven't fully repaid her yet. Before the apocalypse, when I was stockpiling supplies despite others mocking me, my aunt also supported me a lot, and now she has been kicked out, yet she still refuses to bother me. If it weren't for Wallace worrying about her mom, my cousin wouldn't have come to me for help. And she even sensibly said she would leave on her own. Wallace is only 12 years old, clearly a child who needs care herself. I called my aunt to ask where they were, and when the call connected, I could hear a lot of noise in the background. I could faintly make out the voices of my parents and Colby. Through her tears, my aunt said to me, "Wendy, Wallace is missing." 14. Upon further inquiry, I learned that my aunt, fearing that my cousin would trouble me, didn't tell her that I was staying at 101, so she took my cousin to my parents' house. There, the folks from 401 did let them in, as one of them is my mom's sister and the other is my niece. But Colby told my cousin that they could stay for a while, but as a condition, my cousin needed to go out and find supplies. My cousin took him seriously, left her mom behind, and went out by herself. I don't understand what these people were thinking. Why didn't anyone stop her? The cold wind outside is unbearable even for adults, let alone a 12-year-old girl. How could they even suggest such a thing? I asked my aunt to hand the phone to Colby and yelled at him, "Colby, are you even human? How can you distribute food to strangers, but force your own underage cousin to go out and find supplies alone?" Colby, the faux saint, stuttered without a word. My mother, who loves her children dearly, snatched the phone away. "Wendy, you ungrateful girl. How dare you speak to your brother like that? You're out there enjoying yourself, not caring if your parents live or die. If you're capable, then take your aunt with you. Don't come here putting on a show and blaming others." Hearing this, I snorted coldly. My aunt is closer to me than my own mother. Of course, I'll take her away, and if I can't find Wallace, you all better watch out. After hanging up the phone, I took a deep breath, feeling a knot of frustration in my chest. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a knife being sharpened. Turning around, I saw Colbert, who had gotten out of bed at some point, sharpening a large machete. I didn't know where he had gotten it from. The blade was as long as my arm, gleaming sharply. Seeing me staring at him with wide eyes, Colbert asked seriously, "How about using this to scare them a bit? It's decent, right?" That machete was more than decent. It was perfect. 15. A day later, returning to room 401. The place was completely transformed. Standing at the doorway, I saw the furniture overturned and in disarray. The bed in the living room where I slept was flipped over. The food that was originally under the bed was gone, probably taken by the people who came yesterday. "What's all the excitement about?" I said sarcastically, my words dripping with schadenfreude. My mother, who opened the door for me, rolled her eyes seeing that I came empty-handed. Pointing to my aunt sleeping on the sofa, she said, "There's your aunt, take her away quickly." I walked over and saw my aunt nearly falling off the sofa, with no one caring for her. I felt a surge of anger. My aunt had helped not only me but our whole family, and now she was neglected here. Touching her forehead, it was frighteningly hot at that moment. My mother was only paying attention to Colbert, sizing him up thoroughly. "This young man looks well off, Wendy, you lucky girl, living the good life out there without a care for us." I was just about to help my aunt onto my shoulder, but she was heavier than I expected. Eventually, Colbert carried her on his back. I took off my coat and covered my aunt with it, then said to my still rambling mother, "Of course, I'm lucky. I walked away from a home as bad as dog shit. Did you ever care about my well-being when I didn't have living expenses?" Colby frowned and said to me, "Wendy, how can you talk to Mom like that? She's old now, and Dad has been bedridden since the day before yesterday because of you. Don't you know that as a daughter, it's your duty to take care of your parents, or should I, your brother, have to step in?" Ridiculous. Before I could respond, Colbert, who had silently pulled out the large machete he brought from home, swung it around with a deadpan expression, though his movements were light. The posture was frightening. Colby quickly hid behind our mother, trembling and unable to speak. I peeked up from behind Colbert and made a face. "You've been spoiled by Mom and Dad since you were little. Now it's your turn to reciprocate, and you're pushing everything onto me. What kind of filial son are you? I can't compete with you, brother. I can barely feed myself, yet you pretend to be generous, not like me, who can only follow others and enjoy the good life. Oh, how I miss the days of eating instant noodles with Mom and Dad." I waved cheerily at Colby, who was still standing dumbfounded. "Brother, goodbye." 16, carrying my aunt back, I realized we were being followed. No need to guess. My mother and Colby were stealthily trailing behind me and Colbert, probably wanting to know where we lived. Of course, Colbert noticed too, in tacit agreement. We walked straight past 101 and directly out of the building. I took off my jacket again, covering my thinly dressed aunt, and put a hat on her head. Today, I deliberately dressed warmly before heading out, so even skipping one layer didn't leave me feeling cold. Since they were tracking us, it was a good opportunity to head out and look for my cousin Wallace. I searched around the neighborhood, calling out as I walked, but there was no response. My worry grew heavier with each passing moment. Wallace, a young girl, had stayed up all night to bring her mom over, and now she was still outside helping Colby and the others find food. Thinking about this made me grit my teeth in frustration, wishing I could turn around and give Colby a good thrashing. Just as we were about to leave the neighborhood, a man and a woman, bundled up and panicky, ran out from a nearby building. The sight of Colbert and me, armed with a large machete, startled them, and they hurriedly tried to bypass us. I was puzzled by their behavior. Why were they so frantic on such a cold day instead of staying at home? Nevertheless, we continued our search without giving it much thought. Unexpectedly, the couple returned. The girl, gathering her courage, tugged at my sleeve and said earnestly, "Sister, we can't stay here any longer. We need to leave." Seeing that Colbert and I were unresponsive, she realized we hadn't taken her words seriously. She glanced at her boyfriend and then around her, whispering, "Really, I'm not lying. There are cannibals here." The word cannibals almost broke her voice. Colby and my mom, who were farther away, overheard this and quietly walked away. Meanwhile, the girl told me that she and her boyfriend lived in that building. Their neighbors, two brothers, had also survived the apocalypse until now, but recently, a savory aroma, like that of cooking meat, had been wafting from their door. The couple couldn't understand where the meat came from, especially when food supplies were so scarce. Suddenly, a horrible realization dawned on them. In desperation, some people might resort to cannibalism to survive. When they saw through the peephole one of the brothers returning home carrying a little girl, their suspicions were confirmed. Anything can happen in these times. "It's too dangerous to go out now. Let's head back home," the boyfriend advised after warning me and Colbert, and quickly left with his girlfriend. Colbert and I exchanged worried glances. According to their description, the girl the brothers brought home could very well be Wallace. If their fears were true, Wallace could be in grave danger, at risk of being cooked at any moment. We couldn't hesitate for a second. Determined, Colbert and I entered the building and climbed the stairs to door 602, where the brothers supposedly lived. Just as the couple had mentioned, I too could smell a faint scent of meat at the door. The more aromatic the scent, the more anxious I became, silently praying that Wallace was not harmed inside. Colbert placed my aunt against the staircase for support and, with his machete ready behind his back, knocked on the door with his left hand. I stood behind him, prepared to fight the two men and rescue my sister. After a few knocks, someone responded. A clear male voice from inside shouted, "We have nothing left to eat. Go away." We remained silent, realizing his words contradicted the lingering scent of food. The man inside changed his tone. You're too late, we've already finished eating, don't linger at the door, we have 5 men in this house, and we don't hesitate to fight. 5 men, I almost believed him. Colbert spoke up, we are here looking for someone, a 12-year-old girl, don't say she isn't with you, we know she was brought here. Suddenly, the house fell silent. I suddenly realized that if they intended to use the person for sustenance, they definitely wouldn't hand her over willingly. Just as I was about to speak again, a girl's voice suddenly came from inside. Is that Colby? Hearing the voice, I exclaimed with joy, Wallace, it's me. Upon hearing my voice, the door was immediately cracked open, and a head with a ponytail peeked out, followed by Wallace hurling herself into my arms like a little cannonball. Cousin, I missed you so much. After Wallace came out, a handsome young man, probably about 20, stood at the door. Seeing that Colbert and I truly came to find someone and meant no harm, he invited us inside. Colbert carried my aunt on his back, and I held Wallace's hand as we entered the house. Wallace, seeing that I had brought her mother too, looked at her aunt who was still unconscious and felt both happy and sad. Sitting on the sofa next to her mother, Wallace spoke with a tone of grievance. I initially just wanted to temporarily leave Mom there and then go find you, cousin, but my aunt didn't agree. My cousin said that if I could find some food for them, he could persuade my aunt to take in my mom, so I left, but not long after leaving, I felt tired and hungry and fainted outside. This brother saved me. She pointed to the young man who let us in, and I gratefully thanked him. The young man waved it off as nothing and asked if we were hungry. We still have some food left at home. I quickly declined, knowing how scarce food was at this time. We didn't lack food and didn't need to use someone else's resources. Still, the young man brought over a bowl of meat soup. Then at least feed some to this lady. You don't look like you're starving, but she doesn't seem well. I repeated my thanks several times before taking the soup and feeding it to my aunt. At the bottom of the bowl, only a few small bones remained. Colbert, curious, asked, "May I ask what kind of meat this is?" It doesn't seem like typical poultry. Before the young man could reply, Wallace, having just dried her tears, answered excitedly, "It's soft-shell turtle meat." Colbert and I had never tried soft-shell turtle meat and found it quite novel. The young man laughed. "It's a funny story, actually. Before the apocalypse, we bought a soft-shell turtle once, and it laid some eggs that my brother buried in a flower pot, then forgot about them. They hatched mid-apocalypse. And we had enough food to feed them scraps. They've grown big enough to eat now." Hearing him mention his brother reminded me that the couple had said 2 brothers lived here. We hadn't seen anyone else since entering and were quite curious. Just then, the bedroom door opened, and the young man turned to call the person at the door over. "Brother, come say hello. We have guests." The 2 brothers were quite polite. Both Colbert and I turned our gaze to the younger brother. And both of us fell into an odd silence for a moment, perhaps because we had preconceived notions. Fearing the couple looked intimidated, we assumed both brothers would be strong, robust men. The older brother indeed fit that description. What we didn't expect was that among the 2 brothers, the younger one was just a baby who still sucked on his fingers. "My name is Li Wei, and this is my brother, Byron," the young man introduced, after the aunt had some warm meat soup. Her complexion wasn't so pale anymore, showing signs she might wake up soon. Li Wei suggested that we wait for everyone to wake up before leaving. We could not refuse, so we stayed at the brothers' house and started chatting, sharing our experiences with each other. These brothers had also faced a tough life. At the beginning of the apocalypse, Li Wei's parents were bitten by zombies while scrambling for food, struggling to remain conscious. The parents managed to bring the food back home, but dared not linger to look at their sons. They closed the door, left the house, and never returned. That was the last thing they did for their children. At that time, Li was only 3 years old, an innocent child who didn't understand death or eternal separation, constantly crying for his mom and dad. Li Wei missed his parents too, but at that time, zombies would wander daily beneath their building, some even mistakenly entering the staircases. They would violently bang on the door whenever they heard noises inside. The noise from the banging would attract even more zombies. Li Wei could only cover his brother's mouth, crying silently in a corner of the room. As they grew older, Li gradually stopped incessantly crying for their parents, but Li Wei knew his brother still deeply missed their parents. Li would spend a lot of time watching the reed chickens every day. Before the apocalypse, Li Wei raised these pet chickens, only as big as quails, with very small eggs. During the apocalypse, some of these tiny eggs were used as food, and some were incubated by Li Wei into chicks. Following their mother, the chicks chirped about. Hearing them, Li would also softly call out, "Mommy, Mommy." Hearing Li Wei's story, I thought of my own irresponsible parents. Some parents are dead, yet they are still alive. Some parents are alive, yet they have already died. Though Li Wei's parents passed away, Their love for their children remains. My so-called parents are alive, but treat me as nothing more than a burden, a stark contrast between people. Chapter 21. After saying goodbye to Li Wei and Li Colbert, and I took my now-awakened aunt and Wallace back home, my aunt felt embarrassed to be carried by Colbert any longer, so I supported her as we walked. Along the way, I couldn't help but complain, "Aunt, why couldn't you talk to me about what you were going through? Even considering suicide." Do you know how upset I was when Wallace told me? After just a few words, my eyes started to well up, and my voice choked. "Grandma is no longer with us. You and Wallace are my only family." My aunt sighed. "I was just not thinking straight. It won't happen again. Your despicable uncle had an affair even before the apocalypse, but I endured it for the sake of our family." Unexpectedly, he later brought his mistress and their illegitimate child back home. He claimed I couldn't give him a son and he couldn't let his family line end. I rolled my eyes in exasperation. Even in an apocalypse, some were still concerned about continuing the family line. What? Did he possess some outstanding genes that needed to be passed on forever? Wallace added unhappily. That mistress started to edge out my mom, and my dad favored only her and his son. They even took our winter down jackets to make quilts. My mom got a cold, and they almost starved her to death. Not giving her anything to eat. My mom was constantly in tears recently, almost driven to suicide, so I thought we couldn't go on like this and brought her to you, my cousin. My aunt still felt very guilty. "I know everyone's having a hard time now, and your supplies are probably just enough for the two of you, which is why I didn't want to tell you." I took her hand firmly, saying, "Without you and Colbert, I wouldn't have been able to gather these supplies. Please, feel free to stay. We'll definitely have enough food. If necessary, we can all eat a little less." Colbert put his arm around my shoulder and said to my aunt, "With Wendy's supplies, we really only have enough for the two of us, but with mine added, it's more than enough. We'll tidy up Wendy's place in a bit, and then I'll take you to my place." I said. I always knew Colbert had his own stash of resources. We had agreed initially that we would stay at my place first, then head to his, but I would never, like Colby, use other people's things to curry favor, so I never brought it up. When Colbert himself offered, I knew he genuinely welcomed my two relatives. In this lifetime, to meet such a person is indeed my fortune. 22. Back at 101, we rested only briefly before we began packing everything we could. Large and small, of course. My aunt, eager to help despite being sick, was gently restrained by us. "You're still ill. Don't trouble yourself," I said helplessly. Rice, coal, and bottled water were too much and too heavy, so we decided to hide them in the cellar and retrieve them later when needed. What we mainly took this time were bedding, clothes, and daily necessities. I was worried about how long it would take just the four of us to carry all these things. But Colbert mentioned his car was parked nearby, a 7-seater, capable of holding a lot of stuff. I couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. "You're literally my lifesaver, considerate, attentive, strong, and handsome." It's hard not to love him. We chose not to move out conspicuously during the day, but rather, after dinner, under the cover of the moonlight. For dinner, we opened a small bag of flour, and my aunt made us a pot of hand-pulled noodles. The carbohydrates were sweet and elastic in our mouths, simple yet delicious with just a touch of salt, exuding a wholesome grain flavor. After having too much instant noodles, even this plain noodle soup felt like a delicacy. Towards the end of the meal, my cousin put down her bowl, maybe because the atmosphere was so good and she was full. She recalled the resentments of the past few days and couldn't help but cry. "Mom, I'm sorry. There's something I haven't told you." Wallace choked up. Thinking about how the rice you worked hard to buy ended up with my dad and his mistress, I couldn't bear it. Before leaving, I crushed several bottles of laxatives my dad takes for constipation and mixed them into the rice bags. "Mom, would you blame me for being too cruel?" My aunt paused for a moment, then lovingly wrapped her arms around my cousin. "How could I? My daughter is the most caring little treasure." But, she hesitated. "If I had known you'd put laxatives, I wouldn't have added sleeping pills." Why didn't I think of that? Regrettably, I hadn't thought to tamper with the food left for Colby and the others, slapping my thigh in regret. Still too honest. Seeing my frustrated expression, Colbert could easily guess what was on my mind. He quietly said, "It's not too late yet." 23. At midnight, after Colbert and I loaded the car, we left a bowl of noodles at the door of 401, then we quietly drove away. As we passed by the building where Li Wei and Li Yi lived, I got out and gave them a bag of flour, some snacks, a can of milk powder, and the leftover half-pot of hand-pulled noodles from tonight. They had saved Wallace and given my aunt a bowl of meat soup. Given our abundance of food, it was only right to reciprocate. Li Wei was embarrassed to accept, so his brother handed us 2 reed chickens, a male and a female. The female could lay eggs, and how many more could be bred depended on our skill. I naturally refused, but the brothers pushed me out the door. I smiled helplessly, turned, and walked downstairs. Back in the car, I sat in the passenger seat, showing my aunt the chicks in my lap. The little chicks chirped. Their lively presence always inspires hope. As long as there is life, the hope of humanity will carry on. It's snowing, Colbert said softly. Outside the car window, snowflakes danced in the air, seemingly endless. Colby didn't wake up until the afternoon. His head throbbing as if it might explode, even the slightest movement caused him unbearable pain. He felt like he had caught a cold and lay in his room calling for his mom. His mom, hearing her beloved son's cries, struggled to get up but felt dizzy and disoriented herself. She wanted to ask her husband to check on their son, but when she reached out to push him, the man who had been loudly demanding Wendy find him medicine the night before was now as stiff as a cold coffin. Devoid of any signs of life, she sat frozen in the bed for a long time, unable to summon his mom. Colby angrily lay back down and started scrolling on his phone. Despite the power outage at home, he still had a portable charger to keep his phone running. Opening his social media, he noticed that his usually quiet sister Wendy had posted several updates. She showed off her breakfast, her lunch, her pet chicks, and a photo with her boyfriend, both wearing faint smiles, radiating happiness. Colby's breathing grew heavy, his eyes bloodshot and his entire demeanor menacingly dark. He had always considered himself a kind-hearted individual before the apocalypse, so why were his good intentions never rewarded? And Wendy, so selfish, ignoring even her own parents and brother, how could she still thrive? Their family had nothing to eat, yet Wendy had the audacity to post on social media, showing no empathy whatsoever. Life was truly unfair. The more he thought about it, the hungrier he got. Ignoring his headache, Colby struggled to get up and search the house, only to find nothing to eat. He then went to his parents' room. As he opened the door, his mother turned to look at him with a mix of horror and sadness in her eyes. The old woman, trembling, pointed at his father and said, "Your dad, he's gone." Colby couldn't squeeze out a single tear. He felt only cold and hungry, devoid of even the energy to feel sorrow. So, he stripped his father's clothes and put them on himself. Trying to stay warm, touching his father's flesh, though the body was cold, there was still some elasticity left. Colby pursed his lips, his Adam's apple unconsciously bobbing. His mom asked him to carry his father downstairs to be buried, but Colby, as if he hadn't heard, walked out of the room, planning to find something to eat outside. But as he opened the door, he saw a bowl of noodles placed at the edge of the stairs. Colby joyfully picked up the bowl. Even though the noodles were nearly frozen solid, he brought it inside, took out one of his books, lit it with a lighter on the stove, then placed the bowl on the stove to heat it up. As the noodles thawed slightly, he eagerly began to eat. At first, it was okay as he ate only the top thin layer, but as he continued eating, there was only one sensation: so salty. This bowl of noodles, heavily salted, was indeed the handiwork of Colbert and Wendy. Colby didn't know. He just thought it was a divine gift. Heaven pitied him for his unrewarded kindness and sent him food. After finishing the noodles, despite them being excessively salty, he didn't leave any for his mom. But that one bowl wasn't enough, and he was still hungry and thirsty. Colby thought of his dad. His dad also loved his son and surely wouldn't want him to starve to death. His gaze fell on the meat cleaver in the kitchen. Slowly getting up, he picked up the knife and walked towards the room. Colby remembered, that day, he heard his mom's most piercing scream. After sorting through the supplies brought to Colbert's house, we had nothing to do, so we checked the messages in the community group on our phones. Colby suddenly popped up in the chat, announcing that he was going to distribute some meat and invited everyone to come and collect it. Colbert, my aunt, and my cousin were all surprised when they saw the message. Unable to contain his curiosity, Colbert exclaimed, "Where did Colby get the meat from? Hasn't he played the saint long enough? Not keeping it for himself, but thinking of distributing it. Has he not learned from last time? Maybe he's lost his mind." I said indifferently, "Recently, I've taken to raising chickens. Although the chickens are small, they lay quite a few eggs. With the help of a generator-powered incubator lamp, we hatched many chicks and kept them at Colbert's place, a villa left to him by his foster father. Here, even before the apocalypse, the population wasn't large, and house prices weren't particularly high, so not everyone living in a villa was incredibly wealthy, but having such a big place to live after the apocalypse is quite nice. Just the basement alone, I don't know how many times larger it is than my cellar, and with more space, naturally. It can store more food and water. While I was calculating how many chicken eggs it would take to make a pancake, Colbert showed me another message in the community group. Many who went to collect the meat came back cursing Colby in the group, furious at him for doing such a heartless thing. After all, that was his own father. Colby only replied with one sentence: "I eradicated my kin for your survival. How can you not be grateful, seeing this?" I realized what kind of meat Colby was referring to when he said he'd distribute it, and I had a vague idea of what had happened. For a moment, I didn't quite know what to say. Colby had malicious intentions, harming his own family, and still wanted to drag others down with him under the guise of distributing meat. Probably, having fallen himself, he didn't want others to stay clean. He exploited people's tendency to follow the crowd, starting the precedent of cannibalism. Sure that others would follow, then, he wouldn't be the only one in the wrong. Sometimes I admire him, possessing a ruthlessness and selfishness many lack, yet he insists on pretending to be noble and kind. If he fully embraced his selfishness without hypocrisy, he might have lived a better life. 26. The snow that started that day didn't stop, and now it's piled as high as a building. The four of us, in pairs, took turns shoveling snow around the villa all night, fearing that the snow would block the doors and windows, making them impossible to open. After a few days of shoveling snow, everyone's appetite increased and they slept very deeply, exhausted. However, the snow had its advantages. Now that the pipes were frozen and there was no running water, we wouldn't waste our purified water for washing up. Instead, we collected snow, putting it in buckets and basins inside to melt. A few days later, the snow finally stopped, and we didn't have to shovel snow every day. Colbert and I decided to celebrate the snow stopping with a hot pot dinner that evening, a plan that my aunt and Wallace were also happy about. There hadn't been many sunny days recently, and the electricity in the generator, stored using a mechanical device, could power a low-wattage electric cooker. The base of the hot pot was a combination of butter and dried ingredients, which, due to the cold weather, lasted quite a long time. Colbert had also stored a lot of freeze-dried vegetables and dried meat. These were items we usually hesitated to eat, but today we relaxed and indulged, and everyone was very happy. Yet, as we ate, I couldn't shake the feeling of a chilling presence behind me. Initially, I thought I was underdressed, but then I felt compelled to glance towards the window. With just one look, I was nearly scared out of my wits. Colby had somehow found his way here. His face was pressed tightly against the window, his complexion blue and purple. He stared at us with a rigid and terrifying expression, looking just like a zombie. It was probably Colby who found this place because it was the only villa in the area that had been cleaned up. Normally, all the curtains in the villa are drawn, even during the day, mainly to prevent people from noticing the inside. However, the weather had been gloomy these past few days, making it too dark inside during the day, so sometimes a small gap was left open for light. It was through this small gap that Colby had found an opportunity. Colbert and my aunt also followed the direction of my gaze and saw Colby outside the window. Colbert and I exchanged glances, quietly put down our utensils, and walked towards the front door. My aunt, on the other hand, continued to eat with my cousin, who was oblivious to the situation. As we left, Colbert took his machete with him. Chapter 27. I never expected Colby to still be alive. Thinking about it, the meat he had saved should last him a long time, especially since my father was a robust adult. You seem to be living quite comfortably, Colby remarked, his complexion bluish-purple and his lips pale. From a distance, he looked like a ghost, and up close, he didn't look human, especially with the envy and malice in his eyes that he couldn't hide. If it weren't for Colbert with a machete standing by, I bet Colby would have lunged at me, seeing him in clothes that were not very thick. I said bluntly, if you stay outside too long in that outfit, you'll freeze to death. Colby scoffed, what are you pretending for? If you really cared, you'd get me some clothes. I rolled my eyes, somewhat speechless. Who cared about him? I was just stating the facts, and he still had the nerve to ask for clothes. Seeing that I was unmoved, Colby was annoyed but also knew he couldn't do anything about me. We faced each other for another minute before Colby suddenly showed weakness, saying, Mom collapsed from anger. She wanted to apologize to you before she died. Oh, that's good. It's what you should do, I responded. Colby fell silent for a moment, perhaps, seeing that I was indifferent. The anger in his heart flared up again. Do you know why? After you graduated from high school and came back home, your parents didn't care about you, he retorted, because the whole family didn't want you to go to college. They just wanted you to get married early and use the dowry from your in-laws to find me a wife. From the start to the end, you were superfluous in this family. I was not surprised. Born into a family that favored sons over daughters, how could I not understand these things? Instead, he seemed foolish, thinking that his words could crush my spirit. But what was the use of just annoying me? I was doing quite well. Colbert stepped forward and slapped him hard, saying with disgust, You're not ashamed but proud. It's disgusting. Colby was knocked to the ground and didn't get up again, his gaze still fixed on me. You hate me, right? Hit me. I have done wrong. I even cannibalized my own kin. I deserve to go to hell. Before he died, he suddenly called me sister. Sister, can you take care of my body? I don't want to be eaten by others. Watching his chest heave weaker and weaker, his vital signs slowly fading, a smile appeared on his face as he began tearing at his clothes. I knew this was a sign of someone freezing to death. The cold wind was piercing, and I didn't want to stay outside any longer. Colbert and I dragged Colby far away, then without a second glance, we went straight home. His last question before he died, I didn't answer, but it was clear enough. Impossible. Epilogue. We spent a year in peace in our shelter. In March, as usual, Colbert and I went out with a bucket to fetch some snow, but I shivered as a drip of cold water from the eaves trickled down my neck. However, I was too caught up in the moment to care, sharing a surprised and joyful smile with Colbert. The weather was warming up, the ice and snow melting away, perhaps signaling that the end of this apocalyptic era was drawing near. All we had to do was endure until the end of this harsh winter. By then, spring will have arrived. And everything could begin anew.